Kind of go and have each of the gentlemen sort of talk a little bit about some of the issues they've seen or some of the things they want to point out, just sort of introduction, and then we're going to sort of have a discussion amongst all of us. So, by way of introductions, first, what I have here is Dave Levanger. He is a building official and director of planning for Carbon County. With nearly 32 years of experience in building technology and rural planning, he has overseen the total revision of his county's land use ordinance along with 2 decades of experience in energy projects. Dave's a great guy. I've worked with him before. When I first met him, I thought he was probably, a rodeo guy or something. And it turns out he's one of the brighter planner guys we have in the state. What? Do I have to, want me to say more good things? Handsome, he's tall, he's all that stuff. Douglas Hunter, General Manager of the Utah Associated Municipal Power Services. It says here, 34-year veteran of the electric utility company. UAMPS is a joint action agency that provides comprehensive electric energy service to 45 community-owned power systems throughout 8 Intermountain West states, including Utah. Mr. Hunter holds a bachelor degree in biochemistry from the University of California, Davis, and a master's degree in business administration from Utah State University. He's obviously very experienced and very smart, so if you have any questions about energy development, have them at the ready, because we have some good things going here. Next, we have Junior Baker. He's the city attorney for Spanish Fork City and for Salem City. It says here he's a graduate of the University of Utah School of Law, but we don't care about that. And he's the president of the Utah Municipal Attorneys Association. Junior is the guy. Oh, is that it? You were president in 2012, but you're not anymore? Okay, go on. We don't want you here anymore. No, Junior's a great guy too. I enjoy working with Junior, and I'm hoping he's going to tell us a lot about windmills today. Is that your plan? Good deal. Okay, next we have Mike McCandless, the Economic Development Director and County Planner for Emery County. Prior to working for Emery County, he worked as a regulatory and marketing director in the telecommunications industry and as a telecommunications and energy consultant. Mike served on the Emery County Planning Commission for a number of years before taking a position with Emery County. I haven't met Mike before today, I don't think, but just after meeting him today, I'm pretty sure that I want to stay on his good side. And finally, John Baza. Did I pronounce that right? Perfect. Director of the Utah Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining. And we're very fortunate to have him here for sure. He has worked for the division for 23 years. He is a petroleum engineer by education and work experience, holding both Master of Science and Bachelor of Science degrees in petroleum engineering from Stanford. Mr. Baza is a registered professional engineer in Utah. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to hand this microphone down. If anybody particularly want to go first, you should speak up. Otherwise, I'm going to hand it to Dave and give each of you a few minutes to sort of say what you want to say to get us started.
Thank you, Brett. I just wanted to make a few quick points. Get right to it. First of all, Carbon County derives the majority of our income through mineral extraction. And in addition to the income taxes that flow into the county, we receive a portion of the federal mineral lease funds that are paid by the developer to the federal government to lease the federal leases, and approximately 2.5% of that comes back to us. And I would also tell you that the Utah State Trust lands derive probably the biggest portion. Would that be fair, John, to say that the biggest portion of their funding comes from mineral development in our county, Emery County, Uinta County, Duchesne, Sevier, many others. Now, the mineral lease money that comes into our county is administered through a special service district. It's the Recreation and Transportation Special Service District. Recently, they expanded their scope of responsibilities to fire protection and some other things. And they're getting heavily into recreation projects. One example of this is we're completing a 125-mile cross-county ATV and multi-use trail. And I would tell you that compared to outdoor recreation in our region, energy production dwarfs economic impact of recreation. Last year, Carbon County collected about a little over $5 million in taxes. We're not a big county, but we collected more than that in mineral lease funds, $5.7 million. Now that's down from 2008 when we collected a little over $10.7 million, so we're about half. And that's due to a couple of things. First of all, the price of natural gas. I told the guys in the gas business, you did your job too well, you've made too much gas, and so you made it cheap, and that's true, and it's mostly due to hydraulic fracking, of course, as we all know. Then, of course, the other thing is government regulation. The federal government regulation is probably the biggest thing that slows our economy. All of the regulations coming down the pike, and of course the war on coal. And I would just wrap up by saying this stifles our economy and our social well-being.
Thanks. Doug Hunter, UAMPS. Let me just give you a quick backdrop of the group. We're a political subdivision of the state of Utah. As Brent said, we were 45 members in 8 different states. In a way, we are a project energy developer. We develop coal plants, gas plants, hydroelectrics. Most recently, just a wind farm up in Idaho, outside of Idaho Falls. We just built a major wind power source up there. So we've gone through all the different things associated with power development and usage through the years. Probably the most impact in the area from my point of view, Dave mentioned on this, is regulation, but it comes in 3 distinct areas that we separate out. We look at environmental regulation, obviously Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, but there's also the Endangered Species Act, the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act, and the Migratory Bird Treaty Act that come into play when you're dealing with renewable resources. And there are hydroelectrics, which are renewable, it comes in the same play. The next thing is reliability regulation. I don't know if a lot of people are following this, except for all of us wonks in the industry, but we are regulated now so that we don't have any outages. That's the goal, no outages whatsoever, and we can get into that on a Q&A. It's a very expensive regulation. It's a nascent area. About 5 years we've been into it. But huge fines, millions of dollars a day in fines for outages and things like that. And then the final area of regulation that we're starting to see, and we're just seeing the very tip of this right now, is market regulation. Again, only the power people I think would be very interested in this, but in the West, we're moving into a new market system throughout the whole West, basically the 100th Meridian West, in the interconnected system, which will determine how quickly we have to move power around, that is schedule, and make sure the thing, basically we do it on an hour basis right now. We're gonna have to go to 5 minutes. Every 5 minutes we're gonna have to regulate the market and clear the pricing out so that we'll close our books every 5 minutes instead of every hour now. And that's going to be a huge impact on the business as we go through this down the road. All these will obviously have upward pressure on prices. Just so you understand right now, the United States is sort of it's not a very efficient user of energy in the United States, so we have a long ways to go on that. All the little islands, countries are the most efficient users of energy. Japan is #1. That is for dollars of GDP versus BTUs used. They use the least amount of energy. The United States doesn't even rank in the top 15, actually. We're outside that. We're better than China. We're a lot better than Russia, which happens to be one of the worst in terms of usage. So we still have quite a ways to go, which is another impact on the market that's coming in on the things. Thanks.
Thanks, Doug. As you've heard reference to already, one of the major issues in the current political climate is renewables. Those basically, right now, are wind and solar. This is the wind farm at the mouth of Spanish Fork Canyon. As you can see, it's not very large, but at the time it was built, and still today, so far as I know, it's the only wind farm in the country that is within municipal boundaries and located in an urban area. So that was somewhat remarkable when it was done. The problem with renewables of whatever nature is the reliability. If the wind doesn't blow, if the sun doesn't shine, you're just not going to generate any power. And that affects all of us in one way or another. And really what that's leading to is, Dave noted, there's a lot of political pressure on coal right now. And Utah's a coal state. Most of our power is generated from coal. Coal is plentiful and coal is relatively inexpensive. But that appears to be on its way out. Getting a new coal-powered plant authorized is nigh to impossible anymore. So that has led to increased usage of natural gas. Historically, the issue with natural gas is price fluctuations. I don't know if you can see that very well, but that's an article from February 6th, 2014, so just a month ago, in the LA Times. It's referencing the California grid operators asking for voluntary conservation that they can make it through the day. That day happened to be when the East was suffering some very cold weather. Natural gas supplies were in shortage, and California was hurting for energy. Now, when Doug talks about penalties for outages, that becomes very real. To show you, this is the graph of the price chart for natural gas over a year's period of time. You can see on February 6th that spike. Well, if you have a spike like that in your natural gas prices, your electric prices are going to do the same thing. You can see why California was concerned. You can see why we're going to have some concern in the future when this starts to impact us a little more directly. I think Doug can address this a little better, because I understand that the city of Los Angeles is a major owner in the IPP power plant down by Delta. They've announced that they're going to convert one of their units from coal to natural gas. Well, natural gas prices are naturally going to go up when that happens because of supply and demand. And that is going to impact all of our prices. It's going to impact the prices that all of your residents pay for their power. So I think this is fairly typical. We've got all these special interest groups that are attacking our various sources of energy. Coal is too dirty. Windmills kill birds. Nuclear energy is going to escape and it's going to radiate us all. We're going to turn into some kind of a monster. They want to tear down our dams and make our rivers wild. And ultimately, if all of those special interest groups get the wishes, this is what we have. Or this, with our major cities blacked out. So I think the policies that we're making on all levels of government are very important and have a direct bearing on the quality of our lives. Gonna lose something there. Let's talk about wind a little bit. That is a renewable that, again, has reliability issues. For instance, in Spanish Fork, the wind blows down the canyon every night, and you can just plan on it from about 10 p.m. until about 10 a.m. Problem is, Spanish Fork City peaks with their power in the afternoon. The afternoon and you go by, none of these windmills are turning on most days. So there's no power. You've got to have for your base load a reliable source. And so this doesn't work very well for us. And actually, Spanish Fork City through a CDA helped get these windmills here, but we don't take any power from them. That all goes to Rocky Mountain Power. They are a large enough system that they can incorporate those peaks a little easier than we can. Now, we do have an option when their contract with Rocky Mountain runs out to pick that up, and hopefully that'll be more beneficial at that time. But as you're looking at your land use planning as to how to do that, these are big issues. As you can see, the tower is 234 feet tall. The blades are 130 feet in length. We were studying this. I went with a group up to Evanston to look at that wind farm. The base of these are huge. They have a control panel inside that's fairly large. In addition to that, there were 13 of us, all adults, that were inside. It was crowded, but we weren't smashed in. You could have thrown more people in there. So if you can imagine that, these are very huge. Now that raises the issues that you heard Brent and Neil talk about with the neighbors. When these were proposed, they went through dozens of meetings, they had public hearings. This was beat to death. This was approved for a site that is farther west than it is located today. They've ordered the materials. These particular units are made in Germany. They were 3 weeks from being ready to be shipped, and we had some new neighbors move in that weren't even here when all the public hearings were held, when the approvals were granted. And they lived in a new subdivision that we weren't even sure they could see the proposed windmills from their subdivision. But they threw a fit, said this is going to destroy our property values. We can't stand to look at those, you've got to move them. And everybody's threatening to sue everybody else, and you all know a little bit about what that is. We had 3 weeks to solve this problem. And fortunately, we were able to move them east to the location where they are now, and things have worked out well. So I think we've got to be careful as we address these issues. And what are your policies going to be? You can have these at a residential level. In Spanish Fork, we have opted basically not to. Technically, our ordinance allows it. But in our residential zones, we have a height limit of 30 feet. And that applies to houses, to buildings, to flagpoles. It applies to windmills. Well, I'm told that a residential windmill needs to be a minimum height of 45 feet. So effectively, by our zoning, we've precluded those in residential areas. We've done that for aesthetic reasons. We would have neighbors that object to the site. They do make a little bit of noise, although it's not terrible. So we make fun of the federal government that they make these policies that don't match reality. And while that's very true, I think we need to be aware on the county and city level that we're making policies that affect energy development as well. And we need to make sure that the policies that we're making match reality. And generally, with what you're going to be dealing with is going to be zoning, maybe with conditional uses, maybe with some of those things, so that the road that Brent talked about earlier, you don't have one high and one low. The policy needs to match reality. Now, as we need more energy sources, we need transmission lines, we may need natural gas pipelines that move gas to the plants. You've got to work on a regional basis a little bit. If your county approves transmission power line to go here and the adjoining county has it a mile away, you've got to connect these things. And so you need to make those planning decisions within your jurisdiction, but you need to work with your local jurisdictions as well. We're going to make this work for all of us. Thank you.
I like Junior's comment there. I've had some of my friends who don't understand energy talk to me in the past when they've been driven by the Spanish Fork wind farm and want to know why they can't put some motors up there so they can generate power all the time. But it kind of highlights the problem we have with energy is the fact that both the public doesn't understand energy generation or distribution, and in many cases, neither do the companies that we deal with understand our processes. And sometimes a company coming into a county to go through a zoning process isn't unlike that person asking me about the windmill. They just assume what they think happens when they want to drill a well or they want to do a coal mine. And you have to do a lot of education to get them up to speed. I feel like I'm a little bit of a failure because I talked on this topic last year for 30 minutes, and obviously they needed 4 more people to help me this year to get the point across. But I think the issue, the reason I'm here is Emory County is a little bit unique because we have so many diversified energy and mineral extraction opportunities. We have active uranium mines, we have companies doing oil and gas drilling, we have coal mines, we have hydropower, we have a little bit of everything. But what makes that very interesting is that Emory County is only 8% private property. 92% of Emory County is either state or federally owned. And so when a company that's coming in from another state comes to Emory County, and Dave deals with a lot of this too, they go through the permitting process and they go to John and they get approved to drill or to put in a mine, and they think that's all there is to it. They don't realize there actually is a zoning process to go through, and many times it's very challenging for the first time to get a gas company from Oklahoma to understand why do they need to come to the county and get an approval to do a well pad permit for a single well in the middle of a big open blue Maine Coast black, because they've already gotten the blessing of DOGM. So for us, the education process never ends. We're always educating our local residents on the benefits of energy extraction and how that overall benefits our economy, as Dave talked about. But we're also in a constant challenge of working with the companies to help them understand the benefits of participating with us in terms of an effective and efficient permitting process, and helping them realize that they are the beneficiaries when they actively participate. That's really been the key to our message and the success that Emory County has had, is that we've been able to communicate with them that they are the beneficiaries in terms of safety and public health when they actually come and they talk to us, and we go through a permitting process, and we deal with the roads, we deal with water, we deal with stormwater, all of that. And now the companies don't even call John first, they call us first and ask about our process, because they know we're actually there to help them. And we will actually help them go through their permitting process at the state level, because we want them here, but we just want it done appropriately in a way that we actually feel like we can manage as residents of Emory County. And so we feel like we've actually established a process that's worked extremely well in the county. But I will tell you that it has taken us decades. We're 20 years into that effort to get to the point where the companies actually feel like they trust us enough to communicate, rather than just showing up and say, come on, enforce me, I dare you, I'm a multi-million-dollar company, I dare you. That's the way they came in initially. And so now we think we've, for the most part, succeeded, but it's an ongoing battle. I would just echo again, though, the biggest challenge I think we face, and a lot of you will face over time, and I think it's both mineral extraction and energy, is the ongoing education. You cannot stop. You know, you have to work with your local paper, you have to work in commission meetings, and always over-communicate on these projects. Otherwise, the wrong information will spread, especially with things like Facebook and stuff, so fast that you cannot regain control. So I think that's my comments to start.
I appreciate Mike's comments, because that was exactly what I wanted to talk about, is the evolution that we've seen in terms of energy extraction in Utah. My agency has been around in one form or another since 1955. If you look at the 2 pages I've thrown into your syllabus, you'll see that it talks about our 3 regulatory programs and 1 non-regulatory program. But the oldest one we've got was the oil and gas program, which was established in 1955. Now that seems like a long time ago, but that was only 1 year before I was born. And so I've seen a lot of the things that we do in terms of state policy related to energy. I've grown up with that, and it's happened within my lifetime. And it's really interesting that, you know, what Mike says is absolutely true, is we've had to educate people coming into the state because they come from other places where maybe they haven't had an attitude towards proper surface use, or the best way to work with your local governments in terms of developing their energy projects. I know that in Texas, you've got kind of this overarching Texas Railroad Commission, which handles oil and gas development. Not that they do anything with railroads anymore. They're the energy officials of the state of Texas. So a company is used to working with one entity in Texas, but here in Utah, because we have federal government, state government, a lot of the local counties have their own land use plans, and even tribes have their own specific needs and desires related to their energy development. We've had to evolve from a situation in 1955 where our law was pretty much entirely related to the underground extraction of oil and gas, to now where we pay a lot of attention to land use, to service use, to issues related to who owns which part of that land. The one thing that is probably more complicating to us right now than ever has been is this concept of split estate. And that's where one person owns the minerals and another person or entity owns the surface. And the most ideal situation in terms of land use development in Utah would be the same person owns both of them, and that happens to be you. But that isn't the case in most of Utah. Let me tell you, we're seeing more and more conflicts develop because surface owners don't realize that they are co-tenants on that land with somebody else who owns the minerals. and they both have property rights, just like Brent was.
I get that kind of thing all the time.
Right, and so what we've seen in the United States is case law has tended to lean towards the superior right of the minerals, because in order to develop the minerals, you have to use so much of the surface. But in Utah, we don't have a lot of case law to refer to, so we're basically somewhat traditionalist, but we're finding new ways to bring the parties together. The attorneys who spoke in the last hour, who talked about communication and trying to get started early on projects and letting people know what you're doing, that applies so much with the energy development that we're seeing in Utah. And we have to educate companies too, to say, have you talked to the surface owner? Have you talked to the counties? You better make sure that you're talking to those people in order to get your project in line, under budget, and within the timeframes that you're hoping for. So that's our role, we feel, as a state agency, is not only to protect the public and to preserve the environment, because that's a big deal to us, but to try to allow as much extractive activities in energy development and foster that kind of development so it's responsible and that people are minding their P's and Q's and we're actually getting this stuff out of the ground that we desperately need.
Thanks all of you gentlemen. This is our opportunity now, folks, if there's anything you'd like them to comment on or anything you'd like to ask them about energy development, this is the chance to do it. So speak up, raise your hand, throw a rock, whatever. Mike, I want to start off by, you said something that kind of got me thinking, okay, and especially for this group here. You said that it's been kind of, and all of you, I'd like to hear all your comments on this. You said it's been like a long process to kind of get the planning and the ordinances and so forth in place to manage this. Can you comment on that a little bit more? I mean, if one of these folks is in a situation where they're just starting that out and they want to get to where you are, what do they do?
Emory County's probably always been the best model of how not to do things a lot of times. When the first power plant came into Huntington in the late 60s, it forced Emory County to actually create its first land use ordinance. It was created as a direct result of the Huntington power plant. So 1970 is the first time we actually had a land use ordinance, and that was basically because already by 1970 we had become a trailer park community. Those of you might have remembered driving through Huntington in 1975. It was basically the city hall and 3,000 trailers. And that's what came as a result of the energy development. And so that forced that responsive planning. That's the worst way to plan, always, is to respond to the crisis that you have today. And so what happened is they got fairly proactive between about 70 and 78, and then in the mid-80s they identified a new opportunity that was going to be coming, which is called coal bed methane. And because of how poorly we kind of responded to what had happened in the 70s, we wanted to get ahead of the curve when it came to the new gas production. So the county commission and the planning commission actually went to some other communities. They traveled to New Mexico and to Texas, Colorado, looked at other places that had done it wrong and tried to figure out how can we do it right. And what really developed out of that process was amendments to our general plan, amendments to our ordinances, which would effectively force those companies to go through our local process because of the huge impacts that we had. I mean, Emory County's not got as many coal bed methane wells as Carbon County, but we still have about 1,000, 1,100 spread, but they're fairly dense in a specific part of the county. We were able to mitigate that through our planning process in such a way that those actually ended up becoming incredibly big resources in terms of development of roads, establishment of road right-of-ways, and then most importantly, revenue generation for the county. And so because we had a horrible experience in the past, we actually ended up with a very good experience the next time around. And that's just kind of led us into additional ways to always be thinking forward. The other area that we have had to deal with this in a proactive way is on the management of roads. When you have a county that's the size of the state of Massachusetts and it's almost all dirt roads and federal government land, and you have a drilling rig that goes out and wants to do fracking, I don't think many of you have even a comprehension of what a fracking project will do to a county road. When you have several thousand truck trips in between on one county road to a specific spot over a few week period, we've seen county roads literally turn into 3 feet of pure flour. I mean, literally from being a hard surface gravel road and then 3 weeks later, you cannot get a 4-wheel drive vehicle through it under any circumstance. those are the issues that we've had to find, that we didn't think about that when we first thought. We have practices in place now and have found ways to work with the companies proactively to mitigate that before they arrive.
What about you, Dave? What about your experiences in your county? The same thing.
Well, I'll just echo what Mike said. My first experience was in 1992. We had a company come in from Alabama that actually pioneered the coal bed methane. They were later purchased by Phillips 66, which is now ConocoPhillips, and they're great to get along with. We have no conflicts with them. We have two of the majors there. We have ConocoPhillips, we have Anadarko. We really don't have any problems with them. We have problems with some of the other players, and like Mike, we had to develop a road encroachment ordinance. And I remember that when we first locked horn with River Gas, and I'm naming names because they don't exist anymore. I don't know. First thing we ended up with it was in the Board of Adjustment, and that was a dog and pony show, I don't mind telling you, and nobody won out of that. And so that's when we started developing our conditional use processes and started regulating them. Not very heavily, just enough to make sure that the citizens in the area were protected. And then, of course, we always, from the get-go, worked with the division, first Lowell before John, and I used to spend a lot of time with Mike's predecessor, and I still do with Mike from time to time. We chat, and I called other counties in Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana, and found out how they did it. And I tried to learn from their mistakes, and so yes, that's what he told you is about right.
So stealing is the key.
Yes, always.
Either stealing or bad experience, right?
That's right.
I think the issue that affects all the people on this panel, though, the next big one was talked today earlier about it, is transmission. Transmission is the one I think we're going to have to fight the hardest to get our arms around next. I think that the legislature's had a few bills this year. I predict over the next 5 years, you're going to see probably 10 bills a year dealing with siting and also federal issues planning for transmission. You can't have solar, you can't have wind, you can't have new natural gas generation in the locations where they want to put it without new generation. As an example, the electrical lines that flow between Provo and Monticello, so going through us, virtually are at capacity. So there's a 345 line, there's a 138 line. Those are big pipes. I can let Doug tell you how big they are. They're just big to me. But they're virtually at capacity. And so we talk about solar, we talk about renewables, we talk about new other generations. The reality is, it's really nice, but we've got about 10% of the capacity is actually still left in those lines to get it anywhere. So we couldn't get it to the Wasatch Front if we wanted to. Even in the Beaver Millard area, where a lot of that solar and wind development is happening, and will happen in the future. Did you know that connection between that point and to distribute that in Utah, if we wanted to pay those rates, doesn't exist. We don't even have tie points that are adequate to tie those in if we could utilize that power. Now, the majority of that power currently goes to California, but if Utah had renewable portfolio standards that required us to do it, the transmission doesn't exist to make that happen today.
Anybody else want to comment on that? Transmission is an interesting thing in my office because, of course, in order to transmit, they have to acquire property, right? And so a lot of people, domain happens, a lot of people are unhappy. I know that in Tooele County, we've had some excitement. Up in Osceola County, we've had a lot of excitement with just what you're saying. Trying to increase the lines because they're at capacity, we need more.
I would just add to that along with transmission comes pipelining. Pipelining is really critical to the state right now, and unfortunately, none of us had enough foresight to say we're going to have specific corridors for pipelines. So now that the population has increased in various areas of the state, these are going through people's front yards, not just their backyards. So those types of issues, transmission and pipelining, are going to be certainly things that we're going to have to address at all levels of government as time goes on.
In Emory County, those who are familiar with the San Rafael Swell, one of the challenges it creates for us is we end up with one pinch point that is actually, if you're familiar with Buckhorn Draw, a very popular spot, just north of Buckhorn Draw, we have one spot where transmission can go through. It's about 1.5 miles wide. Right now, there's already a 345 line and a smaller line going through that. So we've had 3 other proposals, looking at interstate proposals that do not deliver power to the state of Utah, include that in their alternatives. What happens if they succeed, eat up that pipeline and then that corridor, and then we do have either the nuclear project or some other project occur in Green River, but we can't get the power out because we've already utilized that corridor. And we don't get very much taxes, as you guys who are also centrally assessed. What value do we get locally if we have interstate transmission lines through our county that don't drop any power to the state of Utah? Those are all the policy issues that you have to factor into that.
So, if you're in a situation where you're in a place where you don't have a lot of energy development right now, or maybe you have a little bit, not too much, and suddenly you find out Rocky Mountain Power is coming through with the power line, or suddenly you find out an oil company is coming along wanting to drill, to do some drilling. What's your first step? I mean, what's the first thing that you do in order to react to that and hopefully try to manage it?
Panic.
Panic is first, gotcha, then what?
Well, what I would do, if any of you are looking at that sort of thing, looking down a gun barrel at that, is start talking to other counties that deal with it. Call Mike.
Don't go.
But anyway, you know, what we have done is we've tried to streamline our regulations. We really only have, and Brent's aware of this, we have ours knocked down, except for in very special cases, we have our conditional use requirements or exactions, whatever you may want to call them, down to 4. There's only 4 that we ask most of the time. 5, Frankie's giving me the 5 sign, excuse me.
And those are, if you can remember.
I don't, but Frankie will tell us, go ahead.
Comply with all state, federal, and regulatory agencies, the laws of all state, federal, and regulatory agencies. Comply with all laws and ordinances of Carbon County. Only is 4. Do not disturb and maintain drainage ways. And no camp trailers to be used as office or living facilities on location.
That sort of thing, very simple stuff. And we found, we used to have a Denny's menu of them. There was about 2 pages of them, and it didn't work, so. Streamline.
Anybody want to add anything to that? The next thing that I want to ask about, and I guess I'd start with Junior on this one. Is there any kind of energy development that any of you have seen that didn't result in an uproar? Is there any kind of energy development that people like or that people will accept?
You know, there's always, it seems, some interest group that's opposed to anything that's proposed. You know, you would think that the hydroelectric dams would be really welcome as a renewable. It's the cleanest energy we have. Utah's fortunate to have 2 major dams near our borders that we draw a lot of power from. It's like I said, the cleanest power there is, and yet we saw a proposal surface 4 or 5 years ago. Says let's tear down the dam, let's drain Lake Powell, let's make the Colorado River wild again. From an energy perspective, you know, that's just insane. When we did the windmills, as I mentioned, we don't think from the new subdivision these people live, they could even see where the proposed windmills would be, and yet they raised such an uproar that they moved. Now, you know, it maybe worked out better, they're in a good location now, but, you know, we were really concerned about being involved in a lawsuit over that. And, you know, as we met in closed session with our council, we've made the determination that we'll help them negotiate, we'll see if we can get it moved, but if not, we'll litigate with the neighbors before we litigate with the vested developer. And that's just a tough decision you have to make, but that's a decision we made, and unfortunately it got worked out, we didn't come to that. But I don't know that there's anything dealing with energy that's going to solve that. And, you know, I'll share a personal opinion too. With coal under attack the way it is, and you've got your base load that you've got to have a reliable source, I really think the future in a reliable, steady source of power is probably nuclear. And there hasn't been a nuclear power plant completed in the United States in 30 years because of the regulatory process. We've got to make some changes to accommodate that, and those are very controversial. Those seem to be gaining some acceptance when the tsunami hit in Japan, and They had the radioactive leak, and now they're under attack. I understand there's some new technology coming. Doug might know a little bit more about that, but we're facing an energy crisis because of the attack on coal in our state. I think it was John noted in his material that Utah's got one of the lowest energy prices in the country. Depending on the sources you see, we're either second or third lowest. If we can't continue to use coal, I think we can plan on about tripling our electric rates. Now that's huge. California doesn't care because of the decisions they've made. They're already paying those kind of rates, so they won't see, as big of an increase. Their 4 or 5% increase is 300% to us, and so we're battling this largely by ourselves. But we really need to come together to make those things work. And that last slide I showed, we've got, I think, to work together to make an energy policy that matches reality.
Is there any way to get those things back on track, coal and nuclear and those kinds of things? Anybody?
It's political, Brent. If you look at it, the West has generally clean coal anyway. I think Doug and Mike Dave and Mike can attest to that. But we have scrubbers, bag houses. We take the noxious poisons out of our coal now. There is no technology today to address greenhouse gases. And that's where it's under attack from. I don't know if there's an answer to that, and I think it's more political than scientific, to be honest with you.
You're here.
Yeah, I was about to ask you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Junior's saying, but I think I've never been involved in an energy project that has had opposition, but we actually put that into the planning process. You just have to anticipate that. That's what's going to do. You have to put time and money associated with it. In terms of, a very complex topic is nuclear energy. UAMPS right now is involved in, and this is a hedge against carbon, where whether it's political or scientific or whatever, the die has been cast. New coal plants they can only put out 1,100 pounds of carbon dioxide per megawatt hour. There's no technology that allows us to do that, none whatsoever. So no new coal plants. So you could go ahead and try and permit a coal plant, you just can't meet the Clean Air Act and get a permit to operate it. So that's why that's dead. Existing coal plants, the rule is supposed to come out in June. The rumor is it's going to be 1,600 pounds per megawatt hour. Might as well be on the moon. Right now we put out 2,200 pounds per megawatt hour. We might be able to get that down to 2,000 pounds, down to a ton, but that'd be tough. We'll never get to 1,600. So existing coal, we're understanding that'll probably be a 5-year phase in. So we're probably talking about 2019 to 2022 that most of the coal plants could be shut down. Obviously, there'll be some lawsuits over that. We'll fight to go out. I won't speak for Rocky Mountain. UAMPS is pretty well consider the fact that we'll have all of our coal shut down by 2025. We won't have any existing coal plants operating around it. So we're going to shift over. Right now we're planning on shifting to nuclear generation, and we're working on small modular reactors. These are reactors that are under 250 megawatts. The ones that we're interested in are 45 megawatts each. The price of those right now, it's a hard thing to get across to people. Everybody in this room pays about 9 cents on average per kilowatt hour. That's your retail rate. Half of that is distribution cost, maintenance, line crews, so on and so forth. Only about half of that is wholesale. So the wholesale market being about 4 cents, 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Right now, natural gas, all in combined cycle, is 7.5 cents. Okay, so right there, we're increasing it by over a third. The nuclear will be about 8.5 cents right now. We hope that'll be closer to 8 cents down the road. Coal, so you get a feel for that right now. Coal is about 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour. It is one of our, hydro actually is our lowest. We're only paying about 3 cents a kilowatt hour for hydro, though new hydro is 8 cents. The latest, we're putting one up on the Columbia River. Right now it'll be about 8 cents a kilowatt hour, but there's no carbon with it. That's the big thing. So So you gotta understand, carbon is gonna be the big regulated gas. We're gonna have to move along with that, and I think we will make that transition. The site in Green River is obviously a site. Right now, we're interested in putting our reactors up in Idaho. That's for political reasons, to be honest. We're looking at doing the Idaho National Laboratories up in Idaho, outside Idaho Falls by ARCO. They've had 52 reactors up there already. They've got all the water we need. They've got transmission we need. They've got all the stuff, and they're pro-nuclear. The state is that way. The community is that way, and so it's the least opposition. But we will still have a lot of opposition to this, but we'll start an education process, and we build this in. Any developer's not doing that is really not taking in another cost.
I'll just say on the Green River project, I'm now 7 years in on that, and we have a minimum of 12 to go. So I mean, just for people's perspective, when you're looking at these transitions, these are generational types of transitions, but you gotta pay for it in between that transition. Whether Green River happens or not, your rates are gonna go up until that comes, just as Doug's talking about. So, you know, that's gonna be a 25 or 30-year project before it's complete, if it's successful at all.
You asked earlier about some advice for other counties. One thing I would do is plan for our energy corridors. You're all gonna have them sooner or later. And if you look in the back of the packet today, there's a copy of our energy overlay zone and energy plan. It's actually codified into state law, Title 63J, the Green River Energy Zone. It's Carbon and Emery counties, and we worked on it together, and now it's codified into state law. But one of the things you really need to look at is energy corridors. Make sure you set those aside and try to work those issues out before it comes. Just like Mike was talking about, we've all got those little places where it's going to be hard to site utilities and lines.
Is there anything these folks, on a county level can do about regulation? Can they affect it? Is there any regulation in particular that they have to be aware of, to see having any other comment about regulation coming down the road?
Again, the federal regulations, we're all in rural Utah looking down, we're looking at sage grouse issues, we're looking at all of the endangered species. Those types of issues are the things that are going to cause you the most grief.
Well, I would suggest the county's habitat conservation plans for about every species you can think about right now. I could give you a great list. We worked with Washington County to build a transmission line. We had to deal with the desert tortoise. They did not have a habitat conservation program. Basically, UAMPS funded Washington County to get that done. It's helped them on all sorts of other things besides just the corridor we needed for transmission to get into the area. The developers, it is our customers that are paying for this, so we always have to be cautious of how much money goes into it, but we bought over 200 acres of private land for tortoise habitat to put in a reserve, turned over to the Nature Conservancy to deal with it, and the cities in the UAMP cities in Washington County are the beneficiaries of that as they get to grow. The county got the habitat conservation program, the cities have the mitigation land now to do other projects, if you will, besides just utility projects. So getting that in early, sage grouse would be really great. I know the state and wildlife's working on it too, but starting just working in the preliminary things of getting your habitat conservation programs for anything that might be listed, even if it's just a twinkle in somebody's eye. I would just start to work on it because that is the biggest issue we're running into right now is endangered species and the bird acts. These have not been enforced previously. The Endangered Species Act has, obviously, a lot of things, but the bird acts have not. Every migratory bird is protected in the United States. Every single one. It's not just eagles, and it's not just the big raptors. It's the little songbirds. The only things that really aren't protected, there's like 5 that aren't considered migratory birds that don't move back and forth across the lands. So having some type of habitat conservation associated with eagles is a very big one if you're into wind power. If you want to deal with wind, you're going to have to deal with eagles. The transmission lines, UAMP's going through, we're starting an avian protection plan in every one of our cities. Now, this could move into the counties, and what it is, it's a proactive plan where each of the cities will adopt a program on spacing of conductor on transmission lines, for instance, guy wires for predators for sage grouse, it's another one. We can't have any prey perches, things of that nature. And so the cities will actually have this plan in place ahead of time so that we can use it as a prophylactic response to any type of bird death or anything like that. At our wind farm in Idaho, we haven't taken any eagles yet, but we've taken a lot of songbirds. And Fish and Wildlife is very upset about it. So, you know, things you could overlook could be huge.
John, would you like to defend any of these horrible regulations that we all hate so much?
Well, you know, we view ourselves as pretty progressive in Utah. I think when we find ourselves in a room with other state regulatory agencies, there are far worse situations in terms of regulation than what we have to deal with. The real problem in Utah, and I think Junior has alluded to it, is the predominance of federal land. And it's those federal policies that come to us from other places that really have an effect on how we develop energy in Utah. You know, you asked a question about planning and what the counties could do to get in front of it. I would tell you from our point of view, the underground mineral extraction businesses that we regulate, you will have plenty of lead time. We have a process of notifying all of the counties when we have exploration activity going on, you know, small mining activity that happens. So when you start seeing that in your counties, that's the time to get engaged with us, and let's start talking about how we can mesh what we do with the county plans.
They said you're the good guys.
Well, they are.
How do you help?
No, the thing of it is, really, they're one of your best resources. So I would add, if you got a developer come into your county or you're talking about an energy project, talk to the division first. They can help you. We have a great relationship with them. We work with their field people in our area. When we have problems, we work them out. So
Just like Brent, you need to call us early and often.
that's right. Call them first.
Awesome.
I would give everybody one more point of context as well, because I'm actually about to work on this. One more thing, and I love Doug, and I really have a bad reputation with Questar and Rocky Mountain Power. Don't take the first thing they tell you as law. They will tell you, when you have a project you have a concern about, we have to do it this way because it's what's in our tariff. Guess who actually submits the tariff? They do. The Public Service Commission never tells the utility what to do. They put it in the document. The Public Service Commission approves it. So if you are in a nose-to-nose battle with any of your big utilities, don't back off, quite frankly, because they will try and tell you some of those kinds of things. You know, if you want advice from those who've been through those battles, certainly call, but I think Doug would agree. There are many cases they have self-regulated themselves into a corner.
We never do that.
No, we love these guys, but I will just tell you that many times you will hear those stories when you have a power distribution problem or a natural gas line. They'll say, we can't solve your problem with this because of the Public Service Commission tells us so. Don't buy into it. They have the ability to make those changes. They don't get regulated into anything. They make application to change those regulations.
One last question, because it's time for us to quit. These folks, they expressed to me, I've seen them all before. Because they come to these things, and these folks often express to me their frustration that they come and they hear these messages, but there's a whole mess of folks at home that don't come. Okay, and they don't ever get this message, okay? Do any of you have any comments for these folks? What would you say to them to tell their people at home on this subject?
You know, Brent, I don't think it is limited to just this subject. I think one of the key things we can do as public officials is educate our population. We have taken New England, our council meetings over the last 2 or 3 years now, where we take 10 minutes every meeting and we give a presentation on something about city government. And you could all do it concerning county government, but you know, everything you deal with, it doesn't hurt to educate your residents and your citizens about that. So I don't think it's limited to just this. And you know, the more we can educate, I think the better off we'll be. And so I encourage you to look at some kind of an aspect of, you know, what do we need to do to educate our citizens? Is it a newsletter? In our community, we have a cable television program. We actually own the channel, so we broadcast our council meetings, our planning commission meetings, and then we rebroadcast them several times through the week. And so we do the training there, and hopefully people are watching that. But you've all got newsletters, you see your neighbors. You know, education's just so important.
Anybody have any last takeaways for these folks? Questions? Okay, thanks guys, great job.